I think Sotrius is seeing a psychiatrist, Phil said the next morning. Simon stared at him. Why? He came over last night really late and he was a lot like his old self again. But he kept mentioning this guy named Jake who's been helping him with his problems. From what I can see, our man is well on his way to being cured of boyfriend syndrome. Simon laughed. Jake isn't a psychiatrist exactly. He's more like a sage. Well, anyway, it was the real Sotrius. He dumped on my innovative arts projects pretty bad. You should have heard some of the things he said about Technicolor wheat. You know, Simon, I never realized just how much I missed that big, dumb, overly good-looking fool. Even the wreck ran better this morning. Simon looked up and down the hall. Where is Sam anyway? He's at home redoing his Vishnik entry, painting around the clock. He had this great inspiration last night. He's going to cut school today and tomorrow. Says for you to cover for him. Ah, no, moaned Simon. He's going to paint himself a camel, and this time Karada's going to set fire to him. Why does he do this? Phil grinned. He's the old Sotrius, and he's back. Simon prowled the halls of Nassau Arts in search of Wendy, but the student council president was nowhere to be found. He did see Barbara hanging out with a few of her friends from the dance department, and from her face he could tell that Sam had had a chance to drop by last night and carry out Jake's advice. She made a point of ignoring him, so Simon abandoned the idea of asking her where he could find Wendy. Chance number 3 was slipping through his fingers. Just before first class, Simon was approached by TC, acting in his official capacity as Nathan's agent. Nathan got the idea that you might be a little irritated with him. He wants me to tell you he's got no hard feelings over the segment you fluffed. Simon was still touchy. Me? I didn't fluff the segment! The segment practically fluffed me! TC grinned. My information is that when the universe ended, the last man alive looked straight into the cameras and screamed, Nathan. Well, it's not really that bad. There was one camera that wasn't directly on your face all the time, so hardly anyone will know what you're yelling. Simon flushed. Yeah, okay, that's great. Tell Nathan I'm sorry I roughed him up. TC lowered his voice and cupped a hand to his mouth. Confidentially, you should be congratulated for this. When Nathan ran back the tape and saw you, he laughed until he cried. Never seen him get a really good laugh like that before. Nice going, Simon. The last days before the Vishnik deadline just seemed to fly by. Karada was a mass of tingling nerve endings as the most important day of his year drew closer. He accepted the students' final entries with all the philosophy of a man facing a firing squad. Mr. Ashley, what happened? This is your picture? No, no, no! Miss Shernick, Mr. Lawrence, you reworked this from a kindergarten project, yes? Oh, Karada cannot bear to look at it. You will give the Vishnik judges heart attacks. Miss Dixon, Karada hates your sister and her new baby. This is not a winner. This is a cure for insomnia. He turned his face to the ceiling. Oh, great organizing principle of the universe! Why have you done this to Karada? What offense, what crime has he committed that he should suffer so? What has he done that he should have to take the bus to Albany to visit the shrine of Vishnik winners? Oh, the pain! Garbage from Miss Dixon, garbage from Mr. Ashley, and from Mr. Simon. From Mr. Simon, nothing! Clutching at his heart, he staggered backwards, head thumping against the blackboard. Congratulations, Mr. Simon! You have killed Karada! No! Exclaimed Simon, jumping up and rushing to the front with his canvas. It's called Subway Breakdown! He said breathlessly, placing it on the front easily. Really, it's okay, I've got an entry! As Simon watched expectantly, the teacher sat down on the small stool in front of the easel and stared at the painting. He was still staring some 45 minutes later when the first of the students began to tiptoe out of the room. Simon was up there with him the whole time, still awaiting some sort of comment as the artist sat in stony silence, not even moving a muscle. Cautiously, Peter Ashley crept to the front of the room and waved a hand in front of Karada's eyes. There was no reaction. Even long after the class had gone and Simon had removed Subway Breakdown to frame it for submission, Karada still sat, his long legs tucked up under his chin, staring. "It's gonna be a showdown between Subway Breakdown and Mother and Child," Peter Ashley later commented, and there was this general agreement. The painting seminar was split over who would win, and the news spread through the halls that the Interflux boss and one of the two school's top artists were going head-to-head for the state's most coveted art prize. Simon knew it was big stuff when he heard that Bill and Dino had a $400,000 bet on the outcome. Throughout the excitement, the Interflux Cultural Center continued to reach new heights of unpredicted success. In addition to the regular programming, the center now ran special morning events for bust-in groups of junior and middle school students. Prominent among these morning sessions was Bill McIntosh giving public readings in the late afternoon air. The two boys scooted. I flipped over 2 pages at the same time. Prominent among these morning sessions was Bill McIntosh giving public readings from The Legend of the Glass Caves. Bill had decided to fight his writer's block by boosting his confidence, and it was working since the audience seemed to hang on to his every word. Money continued to pour in the form of donations stuffed into the ancient Greek urn. Some of it was used to pay back the rental on the tent, and the balance was deposited into the program board bank account, which now stood at $2,300. Phil wanted to add a second tent and make several other improvements, but the dungeon was now carefully monitoring the running of the cultural center, and they said no. As it stood, though, the cultural center seemed solid for a while, so as long as the weather held out, Simon couldn't see that there was anything Interflux could do about it. Thursday afternoon, Simon lovingly crated up Subway Breakdown and placed it into the back of the Firebird. It was time to go to Manhattan and make the Vishnik submission in person. But first he had to pack up Sam and his entry. At the last minute, Phil had begged the use of the wreck for an innovative arts emergency. Mr. Kopadrick had demanded his third project tomorrow, and Phil needed wheels. Sam was already outside, engaged in a loud shouting match with Phil. In an instant, Simon could see why. The wreck was parked in Phil's driveway, and on its rusting roof was a gleaming white 5-tier wedding cake. It was tied down with every means at Phil's disposal, trussed up with cord, anchored with twine, firmed up with thread, and completely encased in fine white netting. All this was attached to the strong ropes which fastened the whole arrangement to the roof of the Orange Beetle. "I don't get it," said Sam. "Why the cake?" "It's his project," raved Sam. "It's time to go for broke," Phil said solemnly. "Undo the safety catches and throw all caution to the wind. I'm going to take this cake and run it through the car wash. It'll either blow Kopadrick's mind or land me out of my butt." Sam turned earnest eyes on Simon. "Has there ever been such an idiot? Talk to him!" "Look, Phil," Simon pleaded, "we gotta get our pictures into the city, but we'll be back in a couple hours, and then the three of us can work all night on a project for you. Don't do anything stupid." "No," Phil was adamant. "I got into this school my way, and if I make it here, it's gonna be my way. If I bomb out, it's gonna be my way too." "But they're gonna burn you on this one, Phil. Really they are," Simon moaned. "Maybe, and maybe it'll be great, but it won't, Phil. Trust me." Phil got into the wreck and started the engine. "We'll know soon enough," he said cheerfully, and drove off. Simon and Sam watched as the cake eased around the corner and out of sight. Simon sighed. "All right, Sam, let's get going. Where's your picture?" Sam's entry, unwrapped and uncrated, was sitting out in the backyard. He had finished it not 2 hours earlier, framed it wet, and left it to dry in the late afternoon air. The two boys scooted to the yard, and Sam paused for a moment before lifting the picture up to show Simon. "Presenting the all-new traffic jam!" Simon gaped. It was exactly the same painting as before, with the elevated highway in the foreground and Manhattan in the background, only the stopped vehicles and angry motorists were gone. Only the stopped vehicles and angry motorists were gone from the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. The roadway was now packed with camels. Hundreds, possibly thousands of them, jammed hump to hump, nose to tail. The motorists had all become Bedouin nomads, walking, riding, and leading the beasts. Even the billboard by the side of the freeway was for Camel cigarettes. It was amazing, and it had all the spark that was all Sam Stavronidis. It's beautiful, Sam, but you can't hand it in, you'll be killed! It's a symbol of my rebellion against stifled creativity, Sam announced with satisfaction. Yeah, but you promised Karada no more camels! I told him I wouldn't bring another camel into his classroom, he grinned, but these are going straight to the Vishnik Gallery. I hope I get a chance to explain that before he hits me. Simon sighed. My two closest friends on the same day are committing suicide by art! According to Emil Karada, the space of time between one official submission for the Vishnik Prize and the actual announcement of the results is known as the period of oblivion. During this time, the artist should do absolutely nothing for fear of offending the great organizing principle of the universe, thereby causing him to take the Vishnik Prize away from the artist and his teacher, especially his teacher. Simon thought this was as good advice as any and spent Friday drifting from class to class, walking softly, breathing lightly, and doing nothing that might upset the equilibrium of the system. At lunch, he decided to risk a trip to the cultural center where tavern scene and assembly line had just been put on display. At the center, most of the visitors were seated outside, listening to the Nassau Arts Woodwind Ensemble, a group which featured Dave Roper on bassoon. This had to be a step in the right direction, Simon thought. Less than a week ago, Dave would have refused to join the group and leave the warm store unattended. There were only a few visitors browsing around the tent, but one of them was standing right in front of Simon's two exhibits, studying them with great interest. Simon looked at the man curiously. He was wearing a full-length raincoat with the collar turned up and a soft fedora with the brim pulled down. And sunglasses. Simon smiled and sauntered over. You'll be able to see those a lot better, Dad, if you take off the shades. Cyril Irving started. Oh, well, hello, son. He removed the glasses in some embarrassment. Or how are things? A couple of students came near, so Simon dropped his voice to a whisper. What are you doing here? What kind of question is that? His father asked defensively. This is a public exhibition, and I'm a member of the public. Listen, Simon, have you had lunch yet? Not yet. Somewhere in my locker there's a green sprout sandwich with my name on that. His father made a face. Ditch that. Let's go out for some real food. I'd like to talk to you. They went to lunch at Gavin's, a Fosterville restaurant where Interflux held most of its luncheon business meetings. There were Interflux people all around, and Simon felt a little outnumbered, but a small sirloin beat a bean sprout sandwich anytime, any place. The conversation was light until the entrees had disappeared, and then Mr. Irving got right to business. Simon, I was going to talk to you tonight at home, but when I saw you, I couldn't hold off because I think it's very important that you hear this from me. Son, this whole Antiflux thing, it's over. You put up one heck of a fight. You can all be proud of yourselves, but it's finished. We've got to start building now, so we need your land. Simon stuck his chin out in defiance. I've got one cultural center and one wound store that says you can't have it. Hear me out, Mr. Irving said calmly. Yesterday, we informed the town of Greenbush that if we're not able to commence full construction shortly, we will build elsewhere and eventually close up our Greenbush installation. Early next week, you'll receive notification that the land is to be expropriated. No technicalities, no conditions. You'll get your $6,700 back, but you've lost. You see, son, there never really was any contest. We played by your rules for a while, and you matched us blow for blow. But this week we switched to our rules. Your rules mean blackmailing the town, Simon observed. His father nodded. Yes, and whether it's right or wrong is not our argument. I just wanted you to hear it from me before it came in the mail, and I wanted to give you some time to work out a way to pass the word around your school. I I don't want there to be any problems for you, especially if someone knows who I am. Through his disappointment, Simon had a strange sense of all things right being right with the world. There was no balance in a universe where Interflux didn't always get its way. As soon as his father had announced the winning strike, Simon had wondered where his anger and frustration were. Instead, he had thought, yes, of course. How could I have expected it to be any different? Throughout all the Anti-Flux excitement, enthusiasm, and triumph, Interflux had always held the winning cards, and he had known that and forgotten it somewhere along the way. The fact was that in real life, the tortoise would never beat the hare. The hare would always wake up at the last minute and pull it off in the final stretch. Mr. Irving cleared his throat carefully. Are you very upset, son? No, that's a silly question. Of course you're very upset, but are you really very upset? Simon smiled in spite of himself. Mom was right, he said. It's business. Thanks for the early warning. He sighed. Now he had to break the news to his co-owners. All 1,500 of them. Chapter 14. Mother and Child by Laura Dixon won the 1985 New York State Vishnik Prize. Subway Breakdown finished a disappointing 5th. Peter Ashley came 2nd, Lawrence and Shernick came 3rd, and 4th place went to an underdog entry from a small school in Buffalo. Sam Stavridis' Traffic Jam received a special award created on the spot in recognition of its wit and style. The head judge commented, it didn't deserve the top prize, but it was by far the pet entry of this year's competition and too good to be ignored. Karada was so delighted by this special honor that Sam received instant forgiveness for changing his entry without the teacher's approval. Yes, I suppose it does have a few camels. But Mr. Karada, Sam baited, there are over 400 of them. All right, several camels, but it also has a prize ribbon, and this is saving your life. The teacher was even more pleased to note that last year's winner from Albany failed to make the top 10. It was Karada's best finish ever, and he was so jubilant that his style of celebration would have looked more in place in the center field bleachers at the World Series. Soon gallery security asked him to leave, which was an annual event. In the history of the competition, Emil Karada had never seen a judging through to the end. As was the tradition, his students left with him, and the teacher resumed his festivities in the middle of West Broadway. This continued until the residents of nearby buildings began to shout obscenities at the 6'8" disturber of the peace. Then Karada kissed each of his glorious dozen fondly on both cheeks and sent them home. Of the 12, Simon alone went home unhappy. He tried to tell himself that to make the top 5 out of over 300 entries should be enough for him, but it just wouldn't wash. He'd been so sure that he'd take this year's prize, just as he was sure to this very moment that Subway Breakdown was better than the 4 pictures that had come ahead of it. Naturally, he was happy for Sam, and he didn't grudge Laura, Peter, Bob, and Grace their success, and placing 5th wasn't that bad. But coming on the heels of the news that Anti-Flux was finished, it just didn't seem right. He thought things like this were supposed to balance out. A goes wrong, so B goes right. You blow it with Wendy, but you're a resounding success in Nathan's movie. Anti-Flux goes sour, but they give you the Vishnik Prize. That was equitable, reasonable, fair, and also the pipe dream of an idiot. Sam and Phil called to say they were coming over to cheer him out of his Vishnik blues, then called a half hour later from a payphone to report that the intermittent defect had stranded them at a busy intersection halfway between Greenbush and Fosterville. Simon went out to the rescue, and the 3 finally ended up at their usual hangout, the DeWitt Burger King. This is your fault, Sam accused Phil. We're dealing with a vehicle that works on a shoestring as it is, and you have to take it through a car wash with a wedding cake. We think there may be some icing sugar in the engine, Phil explained to Simon. How'd the project come out? Simon asked. Sickening, said Sam. Disgusting. I don't know about that, so Trias. I kind of like it. Sure, most of the cake got washed away, but the metal parts are bent to some pretty interesting shapes, and the little bride and groom look kind of funky half-melted like that. I think it's got a shot. How'd Coperdrick respond when you brought it in? Hard to tell. He said, very original, and went on to the next thing. Yeah, if I had to do it over again, I'd have passed on the hot wax, but otherwise I'm pretty satisfied. I call it wet wedding. The subject changed to the Vishnik results, and Sam talked about how everyone, even Peter and Laura, was surprised that Subway Breakdown hadn't fared better. Simon sat through this sympathy session until he decided it was time to get everyone else good and depressed too. So he told them about the upcoming expropriation of Lot 1346B and how there was nothing at all Interflux could do about it. The hardest part was convincing Phil that Interflux had in fact run out of options. On the spot, he came up with 7 different defenses, all of them crazy enough to give Sam palpitations. Well, can't we at least get ourselves a lawyer and tie the whole thing up in the courts? That could drag on for years. We can't do anything, Simon insisted. No one would ever let us make a move that could risk having Interflux leave Greenbush. The town's just going to grab our land and hand it over. That's it. Phil scowled. Well, if that's the way it is, then my faith is suffering a severe blow. The weather's still nice, Sam pointed out. Big deal! We may as well have hurricanes twice a day if we're going to have to close up the cultural center anyway. What a downer! Suppose you and your old man are kind of on the outs, said Am to Simon. Not really. See, I was brought up on Interflux. I knew something like this was going to happen sooner or later, but somewhere between weed cutting and the worm store, we all kind of lost touch with reality. When we stood up on that platform and looked down upon all those cheering, enthusiastic Interflux supporters, we'd already pulled off a half a dozen minor miracles before, and our minds were balled up with women and school and art prizes and a lot of other things. We started thinking that maybe the impossible might be possible, but in the end, hundreds of kids are no match for zillions of dollars. Like my dad said, it was never a contest. You know, Phil mused, a distant gleam in his eye. They can take away our land and everything on it. They can force us into submission and slap our wrists from here to Mongolia. They can blow us off the face of the earth if they want to. But no matter how rich and powerful they are, they can't wipe out the moments we've had, the odds we've beaten, the memory of 600 kids marching out to cut weeds! Phil was on his feet for this last statement. Sit down, idiot, Sam intoned. Phil, that was beautiful, said Simon. Beautiful but useless, Sam agreed grudgingly. Phil sat down, nodding sadly. Yeah. They drove back to the wreck, which started perfectly, and Simon followed Phil and Sam back to Greenbush. Sam went home to catch up on some sleep, but Simon and Phil weren't tired and elected to take a walk. They walked in silence for a while, then Phil stopped suddenly. Where are we, Simon? About 3 blocks from your house. No, I mean, where are we really? You know, Wet Wedding wasn't the first title of that project. I originally called it Farewell Nassau Arts. All that stuff about having a shot, just air. I'm not going to be at Nassau Arts that much longer, you know. I know. So does Sam. That's why he's so cranky. They began to walk again. I talked to TC, Phil went on, and there's no way I'm going to get into another department. I already hold the record with 4. It's burnout time. Then why did you try that lunatic stuff with the cake? You knew it wouldn't work. Why? Who knows why? Because I'm a crazy person. It's impossible to explain to a guy who's got talent. But if I tried to do something serious, it wouldn't have come out any better. No matter which department I was in, the best I could have been was a guy who tried. I told you the first time we met. I show potential, and that's all. Me being at Nassau Arts was a whole lot like our whole Interflux thing. Temporary. I could keep my head above water on any given day, but the long-term result was never in doubt. The words were out before Simon could think. I don't know what to tell you, Phil. And that's why tonight it's getting to me more than it ever has. I mean, what have we accomplished in these 3 months? Interflux is going down, you lost the Vishnik Prize, and I'm marking time waiting for someone to hand me a one-way ticket to Greenbush High. Wendy was a disaster, Barbara was a bigger disaster, and I didn't even have anyone to have a disaster with. Even Sam, who won himself a prize, isn't that happy about it because he's still got a serious hang-up about painting camels. We didn't do so hot, Simon. Now Simon was genuinely depressed as he racked his brain for something positive to say and found nothing. If the irrepressible Phil Baldwin, who could be depended on to find a silver lining to the blackest cloud, was down and out, what could neurotic dupe Simon Irving do but throw in the towel? Phil stopped walking again. I mean, think about it, Simon. What have we accomplished, really? Simon shuffled uncomfortably. Not that much, I guess. Phil looked at him. Then why was it so good?